For the Village of Cary for Tuesday, September 21st, 2021 to order with roll call, please.
Collier. Here. Cavelli.
Here.
Dudek. Here. McAlpine.
Here.
Walrath.
Here.
Weinhammer.
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now move to the public comment section where anybody is able to, would like to address the committee of the whole can. The people that signed in before were all for the village board meeting. So anybody here? I know we have somebody here that's on the agenda. Anybody else? Nothing? We'll go ahead and close open forum at 6:54. Thank you. Moving into our discussion regarding electric municipal aggregation.
Mayor, Village Board, I'll just tee up our team from Nymex here. So we're going to have a few slides to go over. The village has been working with Nymex probably for 15 years.
Yep, pretty close.
Give or take. Nymex, our energy consultant, they've been able to assist us in lowering our costs for facilities that we own here, the high energy users, but also we did a municipal electric aggregation program in about 2012. I think it was from 2012 to 2017. And that's where our residents were able to see significant savings. I don't know the exact dollar amount, but it was substantial, and appreciate Dave Hoover from Nymex and his team in helping us to get to that point. The energy market has changed since 2017. And Dave will talk about that a little bit here. But in 2017, that's when we ended our electrical aggregation program, but had a meeting here recently with the Nymex folks. And there's a new program that's out there that I do think is worth our time, worth talking about, getting your feedback on. And so Dave's he's got a few slides to go through. I think we've got all the bugs out of the system now. And he's going to walk us through just to give the background, because I don't know if there's a lot of board members that have heard from Dave previously. And so talk about the nuts and bolts, and then we'll get into a little bit about the program here for your consideration. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. We've had the privilege of working with the village since 2005. Nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. Nymex, just a very brief commercial here. Nymex, we're a buying group. As Jake said, we purchase power for municipalities. What we do is we buy as a buying group. So we currently have right around 100 of the suburban municipalities in the area. And when we go to bid as a group and leverage that. We do help purchase municipalities, purchase power primarily for two reasons: to pump water and for street lighting, and that's what we do. We manage the purchase of about $25 million of power annually, and that group size leverages into better rates for our municipal customers. Okay. Jake mentioned municipal aggregation. Municipal aggregation was a legislative initiative put together by the state of Illinois. And at the time, back in 2011, residents were not partaking in the deregulation that the state had put together to purchase electricity from sources other than Commonwealth Edison. The state enabled municipalities to be the purchasing agent for the residents' home electric bills. For all those residents who were still buying from Commonwealth Edison. And again, we managed the program in 2012, 2017. At the time, we were able to come in substantially under the ComEd rate, probably save the average Cary homeowner somewhere in around $400 throughout the program's life. And again, just strictly due to the initiative that you all had brought to the table. We have a new program which Jake has talked about, and we currently are running 56 of these, what we call the ComEd Rate Match Program. That's, as you can see, most of the programs we're currently managing, 63 active programs. And again, we represent a population base of right around 1.25 million. The proposal that we're talking about is restarting the aggregation program. And this program, again, as Jake said, doesn't feature any savings to the residents. So the program at the residential view is pretty transparent because they're still billed by ComEd, and their price is exactly what they would purchase at Commonwealth Edison. The value transaction is that the municipality will get a civic contribution from the suppliers, and along with a combination of renewable energy for the aggregation program. Again, repeat myself, but there's no savings to the residents. It's a combination, again, the renewable energy for everyone and the civic contribution. Should you move forward, ComEd continues to bill residents just as they do now, and ComEd continues to deliver the power and service any outages, again, just as we're doing right now. We only have 2 suppliers who are offering this program, and one of them actually declined to bid. The energy markets right now are a little in turmoil. A lot of fun to be in the energy business right now, but we do have one supplier who has been providing a number of these programs, a company called Eligo Energy. They're in Chicago. And this is the bid that they have presented to us, and it starts off in as the amount of green energy that you choose, should you choose, the cash drops, and as you lower the amount of green energy, the cash will rise. So just starting off with just so you understand the way this is presented, should you say, we're not interested in green energy, we just want to maximize the dollars, Eligo would say, we will put together a program where we would pay you an annual civic contribution of just north of $47,000 annually. It's contractual. Those funds are available to you to use for whatever purpose you want. And again, these are annual numbers. Should you say, well, we're interested in renewable energy, and as you go down from 25, 50 to 100%, you'll see that the dollars would drop. So that, just hypothetically, if you went all the way down to $100,000, the dollars presented back to you would be just pretty much halved. But again, it would be green energy for the entire program, and on top of it, you'd have a civic contribution of around $23,000. A number of our communities have chosen to allocate those dollars, and just so that so that's an option for you to say, hey, we want to put these into, improving parks. We could be putting charging stations at train stations, and annually you could make a decision what you want to do with those dollars. Here's a number of communities. Again, we said we had about 56 communities that are running this program. I think we've kind of got you surrounded because we got Barrington, Crystal Lake, Lake Zurich are on the board, but we also have, not on here, is Lake Barrington and Prairie Grove. They're all managing this exact program that we're talking about. Again, it's pretty, for the most part, if you're in municipal aggregation, you're running this program now. This is where the program has gone to. This is just a quick snippet of a typical ComEd bill, and all we're trying to present here is that should this program go through, I said it's pretty transparent to the residents. If you could notice on the left side under charge details, the first block, it's gray lettering, is called supply. The only difference would be, again, our pricing is identical to ComEd. If you were supplied by our supplier, there would just be a little notation to the right of that saying how we're supplied by Eligo Industries. And finally, I'm just going to leave you with this. Down at the bottom, there's a 3.5-minute YouTube video, and we're not going to run it tonight. But just if you're interested in green energy, if you choose to explore, to move forward, and you wanted to take a position on adding some renewable energy into the mix, just a nice little 3.5-minute summary that the EPA puts out, just a little primer on electric energy. Excuse me, on renewable energy. I've spoken way too much, so I'm going to turn back to Jake or open up for questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
How long of a contract would this be?
Yeah, the contracts right now are 12 months in length. So what we're proposing to do this for a year, and then you get to see my face again next year, this time. Again, the markets are a little bit of turmoil. We used to offer 1, 2, and 3-year terms. Hopefully, next year when we would come back for a renewal, we would have those offers for you to do a 1, a 2, and a 3-year term, put it to bed for a couple of years.
In an ideal world, we'd do a longer term arrangement, so.
Okay.
Is the reason that the percentage is less when you go more green because it costs more money to deliver green energy?
Yeah, to generate renewable energy, wind, solar is more expensive than traditional, mostly natural gas now. It is more expensive. There are federal subsidies, but the supplier in this program, should you choose to go renewable energy, their costs go up to buy that extra amount.
Thank you. Any questions from over here?
It's pretty straightforward.
What direction does the board want to go?
I'd like to know what Jake would recommend, and Eric, what would our experts in
Yeah.
this arena recommend for us?
Yeah. I think there's 2 items what I'd say. First of all, would we like to proceed with the program? That's the first question that I'd ask the board. The second one then is when we get into, the green energy amount. We want to have that messaging being we're doing 100% green energy, or is that not as much of a concern for us? Ideally, in an ideal world, I'd like to see that $47,000 the village's coffers, because we've got plenty of uses for it. We'd slap it on top of that $500,000 donation we got tonight. Who knows what we can buy? So if you're asking me what the preference from staff is that civic contribution. As Dave was saying, there's other communities that have utilized that for some green energy related initiatives we had within the packet. Right now, being able to fund sustainable projects such as our LED streetlight conversion, and then also using for environmentally safe products to reduce the amount of salt that we're putting on the roads. And so this money, if you decide to move forward with it, we'd put it in a general fund and try to fund some of those various projects with it.
I'm game with that.
I would certainly think that we would want to have a discussion if the board is in favor of entertaining the program, then the discussion really should center on which one of these levels we would be most comfortable with, because, if you want to play either side of it, you can look at it's free money, quote unquote, regardless of what you do. How do you want to be seen with that free money? You can be seen as getting $47,000 into the coffers for doing nothing, or that can be parceled off, depending on your opinion. We're being subsidized by dirty energy by $47,000 a year by not using green. So you can sell it however you want.
Right.
So the discussion that I believe the board should have is where along the lines do we want to fall, and what message do we want to convey to the residents?
Right, and that's next what we'll talk about. I think everybody wants to move forward with a program like this, but deciding on the percentage you want allocated, that's the real meat and potatoes of it.
If I can, I'll add hopefully clarity, or just clarify one of the options. One of the most progressive communities in the area as far as sustainable initiatives is Oak Park. And they took so you'd think they took the 100%, but they chose to take the 0%, and then they took those dollars and they allocated for projects that people could see in town. So you can kind of touch and feel those. The value of, wind energy or other energy, generated elsewhere is great. It's great for the environment, no issues there, but it's not as visible. So just one option to think about is should you move on to the 0%, I would say, another way of saying is that we're going to take that and allocate that to projects that we can, either sustainable or just general projects that people can touch and feel in Cary.
So other sustainable projects throughout the village could be utilized that we could utilize that funding for.
So the first question of, do we want to do it?
I saw
Yes.
all yeses, yes.
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 No, that's percent.
What percentage?
Go by person.
Anybody, who's in favor of 0%?
I am.
1, 2, 3. Who's in
Let
favor?
let me predicate that by saying I'm in favor of 0% if we're going to use the money towards something that we can say, here's what we're doing to be able to help us go into green areas, whether it be the LED, whether it be sustainable, other things that we're doing.
I'm in favor of the 0 right now because this is only a 1-year contract.
Yeah.
We readdress this next year.
Correct.
We need the money in our,
Trustee Whitehammer?
I just want to get some additional information and talk to Jake a little bit more before I would actually say how I feel about it.
Okay. So Trustee Walworth, were you at 0 for right now? Or
I would actually be in favor of any of the lesser percentages, but again, I think that having this money go directly into the general fund for any general use, while obviously free money is fantastic and it helps out in other areas, I just don't think it sends the right message overall. And to the speaker's comment, if you were to then allocate that's, off the top of my head in using your example, if you're going to take the $23,000 or $35,000 each year and put in X amount of electric charging stations or other things that are visible, tangible, touchable, that speak to the green energy idea, then I think that's worth the discussion. This concept is based on what do we want to promote? We want to get in the aggregation. We're not saving any money for the residents. This is transparent. This is out in front. So the idea is, well, what are we benefiting from it? If it's just to gain $47,000, then we need to have a reason that we're selling to our residents of why we're taking this $47,000 in and how we're going to use it to better the community. And speaking on a more indirect route of, yes, the energy out there is more expensive coming from a greener source, but that's only direct production costs. It costs a whole lot of money to burn coal in bigger picture items. So again, I'm not going to sit here and say, I want this percentage or that percentage. It's free money. We need to take every opportunity we can, grants and otherwise in these programs, to take advantage of it. But if we're going to bring in this money to the community, I think that we need to have a tangible use for it that speaks to what it's supposed to be about, which is supposed to be a green energy initiative.
okay. Eric, are you on? All right, Jake?
Yes, ma'am.
So the streetlight LED conversions, how many have we done? How many are left? And what is the cost per approximately?
So I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I can get those for you and work back. But I
Sure,
will say
I'd love to
that
know.
through
Just-
our conversion process, we've been able to handle and address the portion of lights that are under our maintenance. One of the differences out here is that a good portion of the lights are actually owned and maintained by ComEd, and then there's the rest that are owned and maintained by the village. So we have already done the upgrades to all the commuter lots, and then we have taken a lot of the coach light style lights that are predominantly on the west side of town and converted those to LED. But there's still a number of the traditional, prototypical street light style, like the overhead style, that are still out there under our jurisdiction that would need to be upgraded. Those are more expensive to upgrade as opposed to the lower hanging fruit that we've accomplished so far, but those could be in our radar long term.
Are those in our budget now, Jake, to replace streetlights with LED?
We've been doing it over time.
yeah,
Right, so
So,
there's line item
slowly.
in the budget for that already, somewhat.
I don't know. Eric, do you know if we have a line item in there
You can
this
give it to
year?
me later, I'm just thinking out loud, kind
Yeah.
of, where this money could go towards.
Well, we're just showing a couple examples here. You
Right.
know, I've heard from wanting to use it or have a tangible example of how we're going to use it. And these are the two that we have right now.
Right.
If the board wants to have a discussion about this and us bring back other items, we'd be happy to do so.
I just want to know
yeah.
costs.
I was going
kind
to, once we get everybody's opinion, I think it would be to bring it back, everybody have an
Right.
opportunity to get
of-
their,
Absolutely.
Yeah, we
individual
need some
needs
more
met, yeah.
information, but
I think it is,
I'm on the same wavelength of making sure we utilize it
Right.
in a manner that is what it is intended for.
Right,
so just as a matter of principle, leaning towards the percentage, where were you, Trustee Collier?
zero
Zero.
for using the money towards projects that it's going for lighting and such, green projects.
How about you, Trustee Dudek?
Before I answer, I have a question for Jake. Can we set up a separate fund, such as a fund, something like green fund or energy fund or something along those lines over a period of time? We could actually accumulate monies into a new fund separate fund?
We could, I'd probably just recommend to just charge it out of capital projects or the general fund.
The reason I ask is because I think, and then this will answer your question about percentage, there's a perception, right? So I'd like to have the 47 grand as well, but there is an element of the community probably would like us to be at 100%. Say, you know, we're being good social citizens. So if I had to pick a percentage based on Jake's answer, I would probably go with 25 because it gives you a pretty sizable amount of money. Plus you can say that you're green. What I'd really prefer is to have a fund where 100% of it goes into a, you know, an energy or green, or you come up with the name
Initiative.
that we have specific projects for. And maybe we don't spend any of it for 2 or 3 years and you've accumulated 150 or more $1,000, and then you can do something maybe more powerful. So that's my answer.
Okay.
I should have just given 2 answers, 0 or 100.
No,
Right.
I think, trustee Cavelli, thoughts?
I should add, I mean, there's no wrong
There's
answer.
no right or wrong answer. It's how we want to be.
I do like what trustee Dudek just said, creating that separate fund, and then we can kind of see and manage it, and if it does grow over time, some of the bigger projects you're looking at. But otherwise, I'm fine with the 100%, like everyone said, just that we're using for projects.
You mean the 0%?
You mean
Sorry,
0%.
0%, yes, thank you.
Yeah, just to throw my idea in there, when I first saw this, I was kind of leaning more towards the 25%. It's a nice story to tell. We're still making a big chunk of change, but we're also providing some source of environmental things. People ask about green energy all the time. I get asked that all the time. What are you doing to be green? I'm like, well, where did we start? I mean, we do a lot of things that are green initiatives. So I would lean more towards the 25% with still allocating all those funds towards environmental projects and, sustainability kind of things. I'll kind of wait to see what Jake or maybe what Director Ducharme says about setting up a separate fund for that and how we can manage that.
So it sounds like there's obviously interest in the program. Maybe we brainstorm with the team and come back with some projects
Right.
for you to consider.
Right.
Here's
I think
what
that's the
could
best
put
way we
money
can make a
towards.
decision is we have the information
Right.
and what can
Perfect.
we use it for, and
Costs with some of the.
Right, well,
Thanks,
this
Dave.
is a good opportunity for us,
Absolutely.
a healthy discussion about this, and I think that we've given some good feedback to staff. David, thank you for your patience with us as we go through these things, and we'll have Jake bring it back and have contact me or contact Jake with Eric and come up with some projects, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next on the committee is discussion regarding the establishment of licensing requirements for massage establishments. Director Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. As the board will recall, back in July, we had preliminary discussion regarding potentially establishing regulations for massage establishments in the community. Based off that feedback that the board provided staff, staff has provided this evening a draft ordinance for the Village of Cary for consideration or discussion, and then the process that would be involved with going forward with adopting those regulations. So briefly, just to give a summary, in the staff report, there is a list of businesses currently within the Village of Cary that do provide massage services. Under the proposed ordinance, the businesses that provide the service as their primary service for the business would be required to obtain a license under this program or the new licensing requirements. The 4 businesses that offer it as an accessory service to their main operation, and generally the chiropractor offices that are in town, they would not be required to obtain a license. As the discussion we had before at the previous meeting, there was some discussion about possibly having 2 different license types, and based off the review of other communities in the area as far as what they do, there was consistently businesses that provide massage services as the primary operation. They required a license of those businesses, but secondary operations did not require a license, and that's consistent with the majority of municipal comparison communities. We also did add to the proposed license requirement that the establishment provide a register of employees, as was discussed previously. That would be a requirement that they would need to maintain throughout the operation when they are licensed. And that would have to be available to staff upon inspection at the establishment at any time. Staff also reviewed fees that were associated with the establishments. Again, reviewed fees that are charged by surrounding municipalities. Generally, the fee that is proposed by staff is just a $100 annual fee, basically a nominal fee that would cover staff time for reviewing applications and issuing licenses on an annual basis. That was consistent for the most part with surrounding municipalities as well. Fees range from $50 for a one-time fee for a neighboring municipality to $250 annually for two of our neighbors. So I believe that the $100 fee is reasonable. It's similar to other fees that we charge for license renewals as well, and also for the conduction of background checks for employees. Those would be charged at cost, so there would not be additional upcharge for those services to provide background information. We also did discuss establish zoning requirements for massage establishments. So in addition to establishing the licensing requirements, staff is proposing some modifications to the Unified Development Ordinance that would require additional steps for these businesses to go through and receive approval for proposed location. As indicated in the staff report, staff would be proposing that massage establishments, new establishments that will be coming into the village going forward once this ordinance is passed, require conditional use approval. So that would require a public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals and also review by the village board prior to their formal approval along with their license for conducting operation. Some of the conversation, excuse me, that was had at the last meeting, there was some requests for separation requirements from additional uses or adjacent uses. And those can be found within the proposed ordinance under section 4, specifically looking at the requirement of 1,000 feet, essentially separation to an adjacent, a pre-existing massage establishment. So if one is already in the community in a certain location, another one cannot locate within 1,000 feet of that existing location. Also, there would be a requirement that the massage establishment cannot locate within 1,000 feet of a school, elementary school, vocational secondary school, or state licensed daycares as well. So that would provide some additional requirements within the Unified Development Ordinance, in addition to complying with the zoning requirements as far as where they can locate within the village. There would be requirements for compliance with village other regulations for signage, and also would incorporate in specific regulations from the licensing section into that review at the zoning board level. So the conditions for the licensing for the facility requirements at proposed 5.36110, and also the general requirements at 5.36120 would be up for consideration and discussion at the zoning board and village board levels for consideration of a conditional use for those businesses. That would ensure that new businesses coming into town would comply with these regulations going forward. And just for reference of timing, should the board consider the proposed ordinance this evening is acceptable and wants to move forward with the request or the proposed modifications, staff would move forward with a positive recommendation or from this board this evening. We would schedule the proposed text amendments before the zoning board in October. The October 14th meeting is the next available date that we can have that discussion at that level. And then that recommendation that may come out of that meeting would come back to the village board in early November. And if approved at that point by the village board, we would move forward with starting the licensing process, notifying the businesses of the application requirements, and give them approximately 60-day time period to comply. And they would have a license issued for greater than a full calendar year, because it would be beginning by, I think, February 1st is the date I was indicating. And so that would go through that license. We want to renew the licenses in May. We would issue the license for about an 18-month time period. So if there's any questions regarding the proposed ordinance, be happy to answer any questions you may have. Yeah.
I got a question. If you said if a new business came, can't be within 1,000 feet, does that include primary and secondary of the businesses that are already in business?
So it would be a separate, it was a good question. It would be a separation from a primary establishment. So it would be anything that would require conditional use approval. So if you did have another establishment that had massage as a secondary use, there would not be a requirement for separation of a primary massage establishment to go next to that facility, based on how it's drafted.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from this side?
I just have just a rationale question here with regards to the rationale behind if you have someone that is doing massage as a secondary service, why do they not have to be licensed? What is our thought process on that? Is that what local communities are typically doing if it's a secondary? I mean, I'm looking at it, someone's doing massage. I mean, I understand some of the tiering which we discussed, and I'm all about kind of separating some things. But I'm just curious, how do I explain to if someone's bringing a massage business in and down the street, they're going to get massages at a chiropractor or at a spa, why those don't have to have a license?
Sure. I think from a standpoint of we're looking at chiropractors and other medical offices like that, they're licensed separately through the state. There's other requirements that they have to follow. So they are.
So they're already licensed in a sense for the state?
Correct. So there's, this ordinance is really specifically garnered, and this is similar of other ordinances of other municipalities that are regulating this as well. It's really garnered towards businesses that focus on massage.
Got it.
So certainly there are other establishments like chiropractor offices that do provide the service, or salons that do have individuals that come in and provide a service, but it's not the primary use that somebody's going there for. The individual that's providing the service generally has a license themselves to operate, provide that service. But the reason why we're not proposing a secondary operation here is, again, based off other municipalities and what they've done, or what the standard is, but also that those establishments are licensed separately through the state.
So if someone that has just for clarification again, I just want to make sure I understand this. So someone is just doing primary massages, don't they have to be licensed to the state too? Are you saying they don't have to? I'm trying to figure out what the difference is.
So, yeah.
Do you
So
follow what I'm saying?
there's different.
Does that make sense?
I do follow you.
Okay.
So there's different levels as far as different industries as far as how they are treated from the state's perspective, from a license perspective.
Okay.
So if somebody is offering massage, they do have to have a license to operate as the individual, masseuse license. But the business would also, what we're requiring here is that they register with us and have certain procedures to operate locally.
Okay.
From just using the chiropractor as example, they have other requirements that they have to operate as a business entity through the state. So there's requirements that they would have as well to follow from that perspective.
Okay.
Brian, I have one question, but I want to follow up on Ellen's comment. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, because I was thinking the same thing. Why would we differentiate? And it wouldn't surprise me that within a chiropractor's office, if they have somebody doing massage, they may be working as an independent contractor. They may not be an employee of the chiropractor. So to me, I think you should have the same, and it's just my 2 cents, I think you should have the same regulations for both. So that's my follow-up to Ellen's comment. The other question I had was it is related to what I asked, I think when we brought this up the first time around, and that is, my personal feeling of not having a massage business within the core central business district. So I know at that time, my recollection is you said there wasn't any, but there was one potential. So I was just curious on the follow-up of that one potential. Where are we with that, if anything?
Yeah, so to clarify with the table on the front page, there is 2 businesses within the downtown district that are zone B1 that are within the downtown area. The potential one is operating now that we discussed last time, but there was another business that was already operating, has been in the village for 6 years. That's in the property that's zone B1 as well. So certainly, the way that the ordinance is drafted currently, staff is proposing that a massage establishment be conditional use in the downtown district. But if that's the will of the board, is that is not be a use that's permitted in the downtown, you can certainly remove that. The existing businesses that are lawfully existing at the time the ordinance is adopted continue to operate. But there are 2 businesses that are downtown currently that are a massage.
Well, then for the record, back to the first point is I would prefer to see the same regulation on whether it's their primary or it's ancillary business.
Anybody else have any comments on Trustee Collier?
I'm good. Answering the question, I'm good.
Trustee Cavalli, do you have any comments?
I just have one question, just for clarification. With 1,000 feet within a school, so if there's an existing business, they're grandfathered in?
Correct. So certainly, yeah. So the way that we would look at it is if there's no uses right now that are within that limit of those properties. The existing businesses, that would be the separation of existing uses. There are a couple that are within 1,000 feet of each other. So those would be allowed to continue grandfathered under the current regulations, but that would be a restriction on future businesses of that type coming into those locations.
Did you have any?
No questions.
Just to offer my 2 cents, I agree with what trustees McAlpine and Dudek were talking about. With the licensing, it's kind of confusing. I would like to see both sets be licensed the same so that there's no issues and it's clear cut and we are all playing on the same field. I think that that's fair to everybody and everybody can understand that. With regards to the downtown district, absolutely positively like to make a change to that to prohibit in the downtown. And I actually mentioned about some sort of moratorium or like enough. I mean, if I get any calls or emails about these places, it's all the time. People are asking me about these all the time. And why are we permitting them? Well, they're permitted uses. We can't turn away a business just because, you don't like it. But unfortunately, we live in a day and age where they are associated. They may not be, I'm not doubting anybody here in the village of Cary, except one, because they've been busted, what they're doing. I think that it's important that we set the record straight and we have strong regulations that will make sure that everybody is on the straight and narrow. And I think that's what our residents want us to do. And I think anything that we can do that can prohibit any type of, unlawful behavior, we need to do what we can. The other comment I had about, is I was thinking of the licensing fee. I think I'd like to see it go a little bit higher than $100. They're anywhere between 100 and 250. And I think it should be annual. In there it said up to 15 months. Can we make that more of an annual fee?
Yeah, so it would be an annual fee for renewal. Just to clarify, for the first year, if we're establishing this ordinance, it would come into the first round will be issued in February. That would be through the first full calendar year, so it'll be 12 plus another 3 months until it expires.
Okay.
But then beyond that,
I misunderstood that then.
I think that it's important that we address the downtown issue because that's somewhere where we're looking to put money into. So I think we need to have a long-term strategic plan for what we want downtown. And if this is not really what we'd like downtown, then I think we need to implement something so future moving forward, people know if they want to bring in a business that where we want it placed, and that may not be a place that we want it placed. So I definitely think that that's important for us to look at our long-term, the big picture, look at the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish.
Would we have to go back to the zoning board for that?
So, yeah, so what's recommended this evening, that's a portion of the recommendation would be to amend the UDO for those zoning changes on the second page of the staff report. So it would be proposing to establish a new land use, has to go through public hearing to make the text amendment. If what I'm hearing from the board is we don't allow those uses within the downtown, certainly can remove that from the code so that it's not a permitted use in the downtown area. And then as a primary establishment, so a massage establishment would be the primary use. The question would be for medical or dental office, you have a chiropractor, then that provides it as a secondary use would that be something that would be permissible, or the board would be welcome to in the downtown there? And make sure that we draft the regulations appropriately for that.
My
Thoughts on
personal
that?
feeling is no.
Yeah, it's cut it, I'd say it's cut and dry, not permitted in the downtown
I think you
district.
just make it as simple, keep it as simple as possible.
And it's just easier for you guys when you're telling the story. I'm like, yeah, well, no, well, if you do this, you can do that. We don't need people saying, well, I'm going to run this kind of business, but on a secondary business, I'm going to have a massage parlor on the side of this.
Right, because they could basically say they're selling chips.
Right,
And then their
I'm
secondary
selling
business is
vitamins
massage,
and I'm
right?
going to also do massages, so.
So quickly to Scott, is this something that I want to make sure that we're not doing something that someone could come back and, pardon the expression, but bite us in the butt, type of thing. I don't want to say you can't do something somewhere and then someone come to us and say, hey, you had no right to say you couldn't do this here. I'm just curious. Is this common practice, I guess is what I'm looking at? Direction from you.
Relative to specific uses that you want to limit the location of. You want to regulate, obviously, the massage establishments themselves. You want to regulate in a more careful fashion. They're not regulated now. So with the downtown area, I think you would have to look at something like an overlay for the downtown area because you have business districts now, B1, B2. I don't know that you can just pull a use out of B1 and say it can't be in this physical location. We can talk about that. That can be done by creating an overlay for the downtown that limits certain uses, allows certain uses, and limits other uses. So yes, it's okay.
Okay.
It can be regulated in that fashion.
Because if we're, Director Simmons, if we go that route, I'm not sure if we go with overlay or whatnot. I mean, we have a medical office down there right now, the foot doctor, and so if we just remove it out of downtown, that would be a legal, non-conforming
Right.
use.
Yeah, so my recommendation would not be to, and we can have additional discussions as far
Yep.
as how we legally draft it, but I'm not proposing in the table to remove medical and dental offices as a permitted use in the downtown. That would still be permitted in the districts as identified. What I'm proposing is to create a new zoning land use of the massage establishments, and then indicating what zoning districts that would be appropriate within. And that would, have additional discussions with our attorney to see exactly how that would be drafted. But certainly that would allow identify what districts in the village that use can go.
We have a chiropractor, though, that's considered what?
Medical or dental office. That would be
Okay.
medical office.
But what I'm hearing, though, is that for a chiropractor, we didn't want to have that downtown if that opened up the door for massage use secondarily, correct? Right?
If I'm not mistaken, that's a fairly common practice in the chiropractor's office. It may be secondary, as fiduciary wise for the money that's coming in, but that's a fairly common practice. So you're going to draw some very, very fine distinctions in here between what you're allowing and what you're not allowing. And again, that may just take some extra time crafting the ordinances and adjusting these things, but we have to take a careful look at who we already have in town, the folks that are successful businesses that do have this either as a primary or secondary, and think about how these changes are going to affect their business going forward, if they are.
Brian, I can add with chiropractic, there may be elements that a chiropractor would be licensed to provide certain kinds of interventions like massage, but that would be part of the chiropractic practice. It wouldn't be a secondary, separate use, and you could structure it that way in the zoning ordinance if you chose to.
Okay.
Well, I think the ordinance, just how you're presenting it now, I think gives us some concrete options here. I like the idea of, the rostering, the licensing, the fingerprinting, making sure that these businesses are accountable. And it gives us, access. I mean, that's huge. I mean, the village would have access, and we can enforce it and impose fines if needed in that. So I think this is through the direction that the board gave earlier this summer. I think that we're well on our way, and I think you have some direction now as to how to fine tune this a little bit.
Sure.
Some work behind the scenes, I think, on the zoning aspect of it. So
Okay.
I appreciate, the staff work that went on here. You know, it involves multiple departments. Obviously, the village attorney's been involved, Director Simmons, police chief. So a lot going on with this.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for everybody's input. Our final thing on the committee is a discussion on the village's use of American Rescue Plan. I think Director Morimoto is taking this.
Yeah, I'll tee it up here when Eric can get the slides going. There we go. Mayor, Village Board, it's always fun for us as staff to spend other people's money. And that's what we have here with the ARPA funds. So I think the board's fully aware of this, provide some updates in the weekly update to the board about this. But we're set to receive, as a part of the American Rescue Plan Act, $2.4 million. We received our first payment of $1.2 million. So we want to break this up into two separate discussions. We've got before you here with that $1.2 million that we've received, we've got a couple projects that we're proposing to move forward with. And just keep in mind that there's restrictions. If you've had a chance to review the documentation from IML, there is restrictions on how the village can spend this money. So the two projects that we're recommending to move forward with that first phase, the $1.2 million, is the North Commuter Parking Lot, and then also a wastewater treatment plant project that Director Simmons can, or excuse me, Director Morimoto, hopefully he's still on there, can shed a little bit more light on it. So if Eric is indeed there, I will turn it over to Eric.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. And as you can see on the slide before you, I won't go into great detail. This was covered in the packet, but as Administrator Wright mentioned, the ARPA funds, that I'll refer to them as, do have very specific eligibility requirements for projects. Of those, the four most common that apply to municipalities, I've listed there. And from that four types of projects, I would say the most two common that most agencies are probably looking at utilizing these funds for are in the infrastructure side, which is specific to improving access to broadband, drinking water, wastewater and sewer projects, and stormwater infrastructure. And then the other category being the ability to use the funds to replace lost revenue. Next slide, please. So the two projects that were referenced, the first being the North Commuter Lots. I think the village board, the public is probably aware that the payment conditions out there are widely varying, but as a whole, they're definitely in need of attention and will need that work in the near future. We were fortunate enough prior to the pandemic to be able to save money and fund the resurfacing of the South Commuter Lots, but now obviously the time is coming to shortly for the North Lots. Unfortunately, with the pandemic and its impacts on commuter travel, particularly downtown, and the surge of remote working that had occurred and is occurring still through the pandemic, the demand for parking in our commuter lots is down considerably, and metro ridership is still down considerably. It's rebounding slowly but surely, but obviously it's still not there. So there is definitely an argument and a basis of lost revenue and impacts to our parking fund for maintenance of projects like this. The second project is what we're calling a fine screen raking system for our wastewater treatment plant. This is an item that we had mentioned in some of our previous reports. And if you could advance slide 1, please. The reason that this project is being proposed is because of the influx of what our wastewater operators call rags. And that's more of the general term for fibrous, papery materials that get flushed into the sanitary sewer system and make their way through the sewer mains and into our treatment plants. And these items are not easily broken down naturally or through the water. The flyer that we had used as part of our outreach is on the screen right now. So many of these items, even though they are marketed and labeled as flushable, they oftentimes might make it through your plumbing in your home. But it's really at that point after that they wreak havoc on the public side. So our staff is spending a significant amount of labor and time taking these rags, again, I'll generalize the term for that stuff, in our different processes of our plant, whether grinders at the headworks at the beginning of the plant, or pumps and other equipment that the sewage doesn't pass through and flow through. So this improvement would help address that by being able to capture it at the beginning of the process, so we're not having to manually move it from various points in the plant. And then it automatically screens it and brings it into toters where we can then have it disposed of properly. Next slide, please. And then after that, those first two projects would accomplish the amount of money we have for that first installment. And then we are recommending amongst the eligible projects that we're allowed to use the funds for other I think much needed projects that fall into the correct categories. First being our Park Avenue flood mitigation project. That's a project that's been part of our capital improvement plan for a number of years. It's actually shovel ready. We have it fully designed. There's decent minor modifications to update some specs if we were to issue it for bid. While it hasn't been successful in a number of other grant applications that we've attempted for this project, it is a much needed and high benefit improvement, particularly in the area of drainage. This roadway does not have curb and gutter or storm sewer, and as you can see in the photo there, the terrain as the water flows towards Cary Creek does approach several homes and reverse pitch driveways, and does cause some flooding along the creek. The other next two projects are two projects that are also shovel ready. They were identified during our 2017 village-wide flood analysis. The engineering has been completed, and these are two storm sewer projects that will address some flooding in some of the areas in the center of town. The first being downstream of Veterans Park. So that picture there showed the results of the 2013 flooding in that area of the park. So this is behind it. This improvement would enlarge a storm sewer near Janice Road and Cary Street. And it's a little bit of a bottleneck from smaller storm sewers that would then alleviate some of the issues to the north. And then the other one is the storm sewer enlargement along School Street, North School Street in particular, near Prince Avenue. Again, it's another area of smaller storm sewers that bottleneck. This would enlarge those to enhance the flow and reduce the amount of surcharging that occurs there. And then the last eligible project is the submersible pump and motor upgrade at well 6. So this improvement is one of our deep wells that is actually right now used primarily as a backup facility. Most of our production is accomplished at other wells throughout the village. One of the main reasons is that this well is one of the more expensive ones to operate, partially because of the configuration of the current pump and motor. While still functional and operational as needed, it is nearing its time to have those pumps and motor replaced, and doing that with a different configuration, in this case being submersible, would allow us to run that pump more efficiently, more effectively, and perhaps give some flexibility in the future to whether we would need to account for maintenance matters like our current one that we're dealing with up north in Well 13, or any other future issues that we have with some facilities. Next slide, please. This little slide just encapsulates all 6 of those projects and showing that our estimated costs at this time do fall within the amount of ARPA money available. We would appreciate your feedback and comments on the recommended projects.
So first of all, we just want to work on that phase 1, the 1.2 initially. So what you see on the screen here is the project number 1, which is the metro lot, and then project 2, which is the raking system. The other projects are a taste of what we're looking at here for the second wave of dollars. Obviously, things could change, priorities could change, which is why we want to just introduce them now, but bring that back at a later time, just again, because we don't know what COVID may bring or how our priorities may adjust in the next 6 to 8 months or so. So just looking for the board's concurrence on projects 1 or 2 and any feedback that you have.
Where are the 125 local funds coming from in that one project?
Yeah, my initial thought is that we're going to use general fund surplus to cover that. The parking fund is probably, I don't know what the balance is right now, but the parking fund's probably around zero, give or take. I mean, we spent a lot of money, and that was by design, on that new train station. Obviously, we haven't seen the commuters come back just because of COVID, and that has impacted our revenues within the parking fund. It could possibly, and again, this is possibly, it could be lost revenue through ARPA funds. Right now, they've only allowed us to calculate the lost revenue for calendar year 2020. We could potentially be able to use lost revenue funds for 2021. So right now, I'm earmarking it as general fund balance to pay for that additional dollars. And that's the reason primarily, too, why we're putting that as a high priority project, because we don't know when that parking fund revenue is going to come up.
Right.
And there's additional costs that are going to, be rolling through the fund here. And so I think now is the time to get that parking lot completed.
Trustee Cabell, you had a question?
So one thing I would really like to see some of these funds used for would be, I noticed one of the eligible uses on here is some additional pay for essential workers. So I would like to see us provide maybe a bonus to the workers who were not able to stay at home. And it could be scalable, but I don't know if there's people within Public Works. I'm sure there's people within the police department, maybe the village hall, that didn't have the opportunity to work from home, that bore the risk of health risks, had to incur additional childcare expenses. There are several states that have offered this. I think tonight, Mayor, you got choked up when the village received a sizable donation from these two people, and I could see why. It's a very generous thank you, basically. And I think we need to do that for the people that kept Cary functioning that entire time during the pandemic. So I think it's good for retention. I think it's great to say thank you. And I'd really like to see us do something like that for the employees, especially more so the ones who did not have the opportunity to work from home.
Anyone else have any comments or suggestions about funding?
Is that even something that's possible to do? Is that
Yes.
something? Okay. Well, just with talking with Jake earlier, with the whole problem with the wipes and the pipes part of it, that's something that I feel like that's a need, like a complete need. Obviously, these are all needs. It's just prioritizing them. So.
Another quick one, none of these projects have funding right now, basically, correct?
Right.
Yeah, the North Commuter Lot, we didn't budget for the raking system project. I mean, the raking system will be doing our water and sewer rate study in a couple of years, but we don't want to wait. I mean, this is a pretty high priority from just hearing feedback from our public works staff. It's not going to suddenly get better. And I look at that project too as being a community benefit. I mean, it's not a flashy project, but a huge, huge return on investment.
Are you talking about the repaving?
No.
The raking system.
Yeah, that I agree with.
Yeah.
I want to comment on the North Commuter Lot. I'm not 100% sure where we're going to see full parking lot again in the metro station. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I don't know when it'll be the case, but certainly I think communities all over are rethinking how much parking they need for train traffic that may never come back again. So I guess my question, Jake, would be that abuts to Maplewood, does it not?
Yep.
My question would be, would it make some sense for us to consider parking that money, setting it aside potentially to do the lot, but maybe having it available to do something different related to the eventual Maplewood project? I could see that we're not going to need as much parking. I think that's a 50-50, flip of the coin. We've talked about multi-level parking in the past. It just seems to me like, anything close to Maplewood, you really have to think long and hard about what you do to it. And we could spend $425,000 on it, 475, whatever it is. 2 years from now, it's being torn up. It just seems to, I think it needs some thought.
Yeah, I understand that, and trust me, we've debated the North Commuter Lot quite extensively from a staff perspective of those exact things of when are the commuters going to come back. One of the challenges, though, is just the revenue that we have sitting in the parking fund right now, and which is zero. I mean, we're completing the audit right now, and I'll know that number more specifically, but we're still going to be incurring costs within the parking fund, and when are we going to get dollars to maintain that lot? I don't know. Eric could speak more fluently, but we don't have many years left on that parking lot before it just is toast. The other two, it's not a huge factor, but the other factor of consideration is there's not a lot of commuters parking in there, so now is a good time to pave it. Because we don't have to do it on the weekend. We don't have to do it overnight. They can do it during the day. We can just shift everyone down to the south. So those are just some of the factors, just so you understand the context from a staff perspective here. And I always appreciate the comments about that. And from Trustee Cavelli's comment, there are dollars here. We could move some things around to be able to fund that if, a bonus pay, hazard pay, whatever we call it, if the board was interested in doing so.
Another factor I might add is that with the commuter lots as well, the village doesn't actually own many of the surface lots that are out there that we do maintain. That maintenance responsibility is provided to us via lease agreements and maintenance agreements with either Metro or the Pacific Railroad. So there are some limitations in terms of reuse of those lots. The far north lot in particular is owned by the RTA or Metro, so that is part of the reason why we are obligated to continue the maintenance and operation of those properties at this time, unless those easements are adjusted as surface commuter parking.
Okay, so I'm going to take a couple steps back and just get clarification from Jake. When you were talking about, we're looking at right now possibly $125,000 out of our general fund to fund this, with the idea though that it's possible that they will allow us to fund the whole thing. Is that what you were saying? That it's possible they may allow us to?
Yes, through
Okay.
lost revenue.
So if that were to happen and we already started it, would we still be able to then take funds and say we allocated that for that even though we spent it already?
Potentially.
Okay.
So that's how I.
Okay, and I'm just trying to think it through about what we've got to work with.
But I'll add just on that is that if we decide to move forward with it, that project, those dollars won't be out the door until
Right.
summer of 2022.
Correct, and we would know by then.
And we're hoping to have some more guidance by that
Correct.
time.
So I am going to, I agree with what Trustee Cavelli said. I think that there is something that we should possibly do with this, we've got these funds. I think being able to recognize that and reward that I'm not talking a huge amount, but to do something I think is phenomenal, the return on reinvesting in your employees that have committed to work with you through some of these challenges. I don't know how much, but I think that we should look at that and potentially incorporate that into this. I would support that.
I would also support that.
Trustee Whitehammer?
Depending on the dollar amount.
Right.
Well, I think we would all agree, and thank you for Trustee Figelli for bringing that up. One of the things that I was thinking about through these things, and Jake and I spent quite a lot of time talking about these projects along with Eric. I think it's important that we continue with, we're spending a lot of money in the near future on our downtown. And this is an integral part of our downtown through the commuter lot and we use it for various other activities as well. That said, through my contacts through Metro, it seems like the ridership is starting to come back a little bit. They were very surprised at when they introduced the Delta variant, that there was not a drop-off. As a matter of fact, it remained steady. So I think that, I'd like to remain optimistic about it. I think we have an obligation to continue to move this forward. And also with the wastewater treatment plant, this is something that I think we were all passionate about before, and we just didn't have any money. And this is something that only helps the integrity of our entire wastewater treatment center, and it's only going to help us save money in the long run. So those, in my opinion, are things that we can do. Then if we can bite off a little bit more money for, hazard pay or whatever it is, we have second round. There's some of these other projects in second round that Jake and I go back and forth with all the time about, hey, really, is this our biggest bang for our buck? So when you look at it that way, some of these projects that are presented, and I appreciate what Eric is trying to do, but some of these projects I think can be postponed for a bit and see how other projects can do. I know that I could follow up with Representative McLaughlin. We applied for a grant for the Park Street project, and he was super excited about it, really excited about it. It checked all the boxes. So, I went over this with him before, and I sometimes it takes a while, so I'll follow up with him again this week. But I think that, staff spends a lot of time, going back and forth on these projects, and I think that I know I've talked to Trustee Dudek about a parking garage. I think that I don't ever see that really happening in downtown. It just doesn't seem like it would be a good fit, especially since we don't own the property. My recommendation to the committee would be that we move forward with the projects as they're presented, carve out some extra cash, figure out what staff might recommend for hazard pay, and I think that's a great use of this money, and it will be an opportunity for us to say thanks, and it shows our residents and our businesses that we have full confidence in our staff, and they did a lot with a little, during this. So that's my 2 cents. I think that.
I agree.
I would say we're obligated to, as Director Morimoto said, we're obligated to take care of that lot. And if we're obligated to do so and we have free money to do so,
Do it.
I think that's an excellent time to do it. And on his second item, as far as his priorities go, the raking system is heading off a bigger disaster and might even potentially lead to some labor cost savings in the future. So I think both number 1 and number 2 are just no-brainers for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed?
So we'll bring back some options regarding the hazard pay for the board to consider. It sounds like 1 and 2 are good. We're ready to move forward with 2. We've got an engineering contract that we're going to bring forward to the next village board meeting, which is why we kind of wanted to move quick. That's I don't want to say an urgent item, but I think it's important that we get that done. The other 3, 4, 5, 6, that was just kind of a taste here for consideration. I do think, the Park Avenue project, we've tried for grants. It's sat on the shelf for 5 years. You heard from Director Morimoto. I do see that as being a very important project, and we'll circle back here sometime with the village board to get more feedback from you on that. But just want to give you kind of a vision of what we're looking at. So thank you for your feedback.
Great.
Great
Great
job by all.
conversation. Thank you very much. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There are no opposed. Thank you. We are adjourned. 8:05. Wow, this is the